Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, Essentials in Negotiation series. This particular video is going to talk about ethics in negotiations, and it's going to be one of our shorter videos. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some examples and some ideas related to ethical things that are related to being in negotiation. Maybe these are things that you're considering doing, or maybe these are things that you will observe and come across as you are getting into the negotiating process. So think about it. Let's say you're negotiating something in order to raise some money. Is it ethical to say that you have another offer when there really is no other offer? Is that an ethical thing? There's business, you have a consultant call and ask about problems or threats in the company. Or is this an ethical way to learn about your competitor's company? When selling something, you decide to tell buyers that maybe it's a computer that it crashes without warning. Is this ethical? What would you likely do with this? You buy a pair of new shoes on sale with a no-turn policy, but you make a scene in the store and the manager refunds your money. Are you being ethical? Is this something that sounds like something you would do? So these are all, things to be thinking about as it relates to being ethical, because that's life. And sometimes you may have seen things modeled by people that you respect and that you look up to, but how ethical are they, and does it feel ethical to you just because you've seen things happen before? That's kind of the question that comes to my mind. So let's talk about what ethics are. Ethics are broadly applied social standards for what is wrong and what's right in a particular situation or a process or setting in those standards. We all have differing morals and differing individual personal beliefs. That's the thing that makes things a little difficult with ethics. We have to choose a course of action on the basis of results, duty, community, norms, and personal conventions. So that's the problem is, what is ethical? The end result of ethics, the righteousness of an action is determined by evaluating the pros and cons of its consequences. Ultimately, we're responsible for our own actions. So are we really being ethical? There's such a thing as duty ethics, and this is the rightness of an action that's determined by an obligation to adhere to principles, laws, and social standards that define what is right and wrong and where the line is. Social contract ethics are the rightness of an action that is based on the customs and norms of a particular community. And then there's personalistic ethics, and that's the rightness of the action, which is based on your actions or conscience and moral standards. Let's talk about applying ethical reasoning to negotiation now. Using the situation from the start involving selling something and the statement to a prospective buyer about the existence of another potential buyer. If you believe in the end result ethics, then you might do whatever is necessary to get the best possible outcome, including lie. If you believe in duty ethics, you might perceive an obligation never to engage and might reject the tactic that involves an outright lie. In social contract ethics, you base your tactics on appropriate conduct in your community. If others would use deception in a situation like this, you will too. And then personalistic ethics, your conscience decides if if your need for cash justifies the deception for dishonest tactics. So it really is a kind of a personal deal, but the outcomes of your actions, your reputation, for instance, that's something really to consider. So is it ethics versus prudence versus practicality versus legality? They're all interrelated. So ethics appropriate as determined by some standard or moral conduct. Prudent is wise based on trying to understand the efficiency of the tactic and the consequences it might have on the relationship with others. Practical, what a negotiator can actually make happen in a given situation. And legal is related to what is defined by law and acceptable. Let's talk about the analytical process for resolution of moral problems. This model presents a helpful way to think about what it means to comprehend and analyze an ethical dilemma. So we have to understand all moral standards. That means we need to be able to define the complete moral problem. We have to determine the economic outcomes, consider the legal requirements, evaluate ethical duties, and propose convincing moral solutions. Recognize all moral impacts benefits to some, harms others. Rights are exercised, and then rights are denied. So there's always or usually some consequences to our actions. Who's being harmed, I think, is usually the bottom line when we're talking about ethics. When talking about ethical conduct in negotiations, we have to really think about why some negotiators use unethical tactics. Well, usually it's because they're immoral. And a lot of people think this is just too simplistic, but if the general public would think that something is unethical, then that person would be considered immoral for doing it. People regard other people's unsavory behavior as due to personality and attribute their own behavior to factors of the social environment. A negotiator might consider an opponent's use of an ethically questionable tactic as unprincipled. But by contrast, if the negotiator uses the same tactic themselves, they tend to say that they have a good reason for deviating from principles this one time. So, let's talk a little bit about ethically ambiguous tactics and truth. Ethically ambiguous tactics may or may not be improper depending on an individual's ethical reasoning and circumstances. Questions about telling are clear, but not the answers. How do you define truth? How do you define deviations from the truth? Well, effective agreements depending on sharing accurate information, but negotiators want to disclose little about their positions. The dilemma of trust is that a negotiator who believes everything the other says can be manipulated by dishonesty. The dilemma of honesty is that a negotiator who tells the other party all their requirements will never do better than their walkaway point. Here are some categories of marginally ethical negotiation tactics. So, category of traditional competitive bargaining. An example is not disclosing your way, making an inflated opening offer. Category of emotional manipulation, faking anger, fear, disappointment, faking elation, faking satisfaction. Under the category of misrepresentation, distorting information or negotiating events as describing them to others. The category of misrepresentation to opponents' networks. Then an example would be corrupting your opponent's reputation with their peers. Inappropriate information gathering category, bribery, infiltration, spying, etc. And then finally, the category of bluffing. An example of that would be insincere promises. Is it acceptable to use ethically ambiguous tactics? There are agreements on some rules of the game in negotiations. Some minor forms of untruth may be seen as ethically acceptable and within the rules, and in contrast, outright deception is generally seen as outside of the rules. So you have to have some caution. Statements based on large groups of people and do not indicate or predict any individual negotiator's use of tactics. Observations are based on what people said they would do rather than what they actually did. By reporting the results, there are many marginally ethical tactics. So we have to kind of be looking for that. Deception or omission versus commission. The use of deception tactics can be active or passive. For example, misrepresenting your interest on a common value issue in order to obtain a future concession from the other party. Negotiators use two forms of deception in misrepresenting the common value issue: misrepresentation by omission, failing to disclose information that would benefit the other party, and then misrepresentation by commission, actually lying about the issue. Everybody has motives, and some of the motives for using deceptive tactics should be considered. Negotiators use ethically ambiguous tactics to increase their power. Whoever has better information wins the negotiation. This view assumes that the information is accurate and truthful. Questioning the other's truthfulness may insult them, and investigating their truthfulness consumes time and energy. If deception is a way to gain power, then are negotiators in a position of weakness more likely to be tempted to engage in deception? A negotiator's motivation affects their tendency to use deception. They may use it to achieve their goals. They may use it to avoid being exploited. Individual differences of personality, of culture affect its use. Negotiators rationalize deception in anticipation of the other's conduct. Some consequences of unethical conduct effectiveness. Deceptive tactics are effective in certain circumstances, and when consequences occur, whether the tactic worked or not. Reactions of others. Targets are typically angry, and now they mistrust you, and they may seek revenge. For serious personal deception, the relationship suffers. If you damage your reputation, it can be difficult to repair it, right? So reactions of yourself when the other party suffers, a negotiator may feel discomfort, and then negotiators who have no problem using deceptive tactics may use them again and ponder how to use them more effectively. Some explanations and justifications. Here's some typical examples. The tactic was unavoidable. The negotiator is really not responsible. The tactic was harmless, according to the deceptive party. The tactic will help to avoid negative consequences. Yeah, for who? The tactic will produce good consequences, and it's really altruistically motivated. They had it coming, or they deserve it. I'm getting my due. They're going to do it anyway, so I'll do it first. He started it, and the tactic is fair or appropriate, and that's ethical relativism. So explanations allow the negotiator to convince others, particularly the victim, that the conduct was acceptable. They also help rationalize their behavior to themselves. Ultimately, you have to really consider how to deal with the use of deception from others. You have to ask probing questions to reveal a great deal of information. You have to rephrase questions to uncover answers which skirt the truth. Force the other party to lie to your face or back off. Test the other party by asking a question you already know the answer to, and then note the response. The call tactic and indicate your displeasure. Call them on it. Ignore the tactic for a relatively minor aspect. Discuss and help the other party shift to a more honest behavior, or respond in kind, which of course will escalate the conflict. All right. So there are some thoughts on ethics and negotiation. How ethical are you? All right. Thank you so much. I hope that you got something out of this short video. And more than anything else, I hope that you have a great day because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.